Hello everyone. Thank you for being here for this webinar and for your interest in today's topic, which is the evaluation of feedback. Just as a reminder, we've been organizing webinars since the end of April, beginning of May, every Tuesday at 11:30 on various topics. So at first, these were really webinars focused on the pedagogy of peer assessment with best practices. And now every Tuesday, we address a new use case. And today the use case is about the evaluation of feedback. So today we'll look at the benefits of implementing this type of format and then how we can actually put it into practice. All right, so maybe just a quick introduction for those who don't know us. We are Challenge Me, a solution for assessment and feedback originally between peers. But now we have a system that really allows us to create specific scenarios with peer assessment, teacher assessment, co-assessment, and so on. So we'll take a look at all of that a bit later. We've been around since 2015 and we work with business schools, engineering schools, and universities, mainly in France, but also in Switzerland, Canada, and Belgium. We're also integrated with the main LMS, learning management systems on the market, such as Moodle, Blackboard, Brightspace, and others. As for me, my name is Gene, and at Challenge Me, I help teachers use the platform. So supporting means providing technical assistance, let's say for creating a challenge, but also guidance on best practices. If you have questions about formats you want to implement or about the best practices to adopt, depending on your objectives, you can reach out to us. I say us because I'm also joined by Florent, who is also part of the team and can support you as well. All right, so in this webinar, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to talk about the evaluation of feedback. So first, we'll look at what we mean by evaluating feedback, what it entails, the benefits, and why it's valuable to implement this kind of phase, let's call it a phase, in your activities. We'll look at different possible formats. So we'll see that there isn't just one way to evaluate feedback that you can implement, but rather several, and each format will have its own advantages. And then we'll go over some examples of criteria that you can use when asking students to evaluate their peers' feedback. And finally, we'll look at a short checklist to make sure you have all the necessary elements in place before launching this type of activity. And lastly, we'll see how you can create this type of activity on Challenge Me. So let's start with why we evaluate feedback. It's true that this kind of phase usually comes after an evaluation phase. So it could be the evaluation of assignments or what we call intra-group evaluation. So in the evaluation of assignments, I'm assessing technical skills based on a deliverable submitted by my peers. And then intra-group evaluation means I'm directly assessing my peers on their contribution to the team effort, focusing more on transversal skills or soft skills. As a result, this feedback evaluation can very well be implemented after either of these two types of phases. The advantage is that it's true when we implement this type of evaluation, sometimes the quality of feedback can vary. We might get some very good feedback as well as some that are less developed. Students don't necessarily know how to give feedback because they've never encountered this kind of exercise before. It can be a bit new for them and they need support in this area. As an evaluator, in other words, as a student evaluator, you won't necessarily get direct feedback on whether your comments were actually useful to your peers. So it's true that the value of this kind of phase is really to allow the student to understand the impact of the feedback they've received, to be able to analyze that feedback in order to evaluate it, to also know whether the feedback they gave was beneficial to their peers, and therefore to truly learn how to give feedback as well as how to receive it. This feedback, it's true that when we talk about peer assessment, we talk about evaluation, but feedback is really an integral part of peer assessment. It's truly the qualitative aspect that will allow the student to understand how to improve. As I said, it's true that knowing how to give feedback, some students, if they've already encountered this kind of exercise, will be quite skilled at it. But for others, if it's their first time, they'll need to really understand how it's structured. So through practice, they'll be able to develop this skill. And this phase will really allow them to think about how to give feedback, but also how to analyze it. the feedback will truly help them make progress, both in technical skills and in soft skills, depending on the type of feedback they have to assess. So among the different formats we can have, we'll find this first format where we already ask the student to give feedback to their peers. Here, I've taken an example with an initial submission of work, then feedback on the work, and then after the feedback phase, there's an additional phase that follows. So the student is then asked to self-assess the feedback they have given. So after giving feedback, the student is then asked to take a moment, using a rubric, of course, to objectively assess the feedback they provided and to evaluate their own feedback. This allows them to reflect on both the structure and the content of what they gave to their peers. This will help them understand whether what they provided was constructed properly, because with the criteria, they can compare what they wrote to the suggested standards. This also puts them in a mindset of continuous improvement, since they can develop this habit for other assessments they'll have to do in other activities. And even while they're writing, they can analyze their own feedback. So the first format is self-evaluation of one's own feedback. Next, we have the evaluation of received feedback. Here, the format is a bit different because you submit your work, you evaluate the work of others, or you evaluate the contributions of your group members. So you will receive feedback, and then each student is asked to evaluate the feedback they have received. So here, the point is that they will be able to directly measure the impact produced by the feedback to see whether the feedback they received actually helped me as a student to make progress. Does what I read help me improve or not necessarily? And so this will allow them to be directly involved with the feedback, and as a result, to be able to properly analyze that feedback. It also helps teach the student to accept feedback more easily, because even if the feedback doesn't only include strengths, but also areas for improvement, it will allow them to analyze the feedback by considering whether the feedback is well-intentioned, whether it is constructive, whether it offers suggestions for improvement. And so even if the message doesn't initially align with the students' expectations, they will be able to accept the feedback better if they ask themselves these questions. And so this will naturally make them more aware of what constitutes useful, clear, and considerate feedback. So that's the second format, where the student will really be able to evaluate the feedback they receive. We can also find another format where, instead of asking the student to evaluate the feedback they received, we ask them to evaluate the feedback given by other students. So here again, the student is asked to submit their work, to give feedback on the work of others. And then there's the feedback evaluation phase that comes afterwards, where the student is presented with feedback given by other students and will be able to assess the quality of that feedback. So here the advantage is that since they won't be directly involved, they might be less biased when evaluating this feedback, and in any case, they'll be more objective in their assessment. And then they might focus more on the form, since they won't have direct knowledge of the work being evaluated, although it could be made visible. But in any case, based on the criteria provided, they'll really be able to concentrate on the different types of feedback they've assessed, so from different classmates. This will also allow them to understand whether there's a format that works better than others, the different ways of approaching feedback, and so on. So then they'll have a certain number of feedbacks to evaluate. And after completing these evaluations, it will really help them understand what works well and what works less well. This will also help them recognize best practices. And then the fact that they're evaluating the quality of others' feedback can also create a collective learning environment and provide, well, a more objective view of what is being asked of them. And afterwards, we can also ask the teachers to evaluate the quality of the feedback. Of course, it all depends on the number of students you have to assess. It's true that generally the formats used in this kind of situation involve asking students to evaluate the feedback they have received or given to other students, or to self-assess. But we can also ask teachers to evaluate when we need to ensure a bit of expert assessment. And so here we simply ask the teacher to assess the feedback given and exchanged by the students. And in this way, we make sure that the evaluation has been carried out the way we wanted, since we are the teacher. And this allows students to really understand, we're in a feedback learning approach, how to properly formulate feedback and what is considered well formulated or less well formulated. So making this task easier. And it's true, as we've mentioned here, it can be useful, maybe just in terms of form, to use this format to calibrate quality criteria before a peer assessment. So here are the different formats a little bit to summarize. Self-assessment of feedback, evaluation of received feedback. So the student evaluates the feedback they have received, evaluation of feedback given by other students, not the ones we received directly, but those exchanged between others, just focusing on the form. And then evaluation by the teacher when we really want to ensure an expert assessment of the feedback, which can also be used beforehand to calibrate an evaluation. So these are the 4 formats that we can have. There may be others as well. In any case, these are the 4 that we have identified, but if you come across others, please don't hesitate to let us know. We would be delighted to discover how you approach this as well. Here are a few examples of evaluation criteria that we can use. It's true that when it comes to evaluating feedback, we're not going to leave it at just a subjective impression from the students. The idea is to guide them. So for that, we're going to use criteria. What we recommend are criteria with observable elements, as you can see here. So we have criteria with 4 levels. And for each level, we describe the expectations for that particular level. For example, here we have clarity of feedback, confusing, understandable, clear, or very clear. And for confusing, it would be that the feedback is difficult to understand, poorly worded, or vague, understood. For the next level, it will be understandable but imprecise. The feedback is generally understandable but lacks structure or precision. The message is clear, well-worded, understandable without effort. And then finally, the feedback is perfectly clear, well-structured, fluid, and easy to read and ensure. And so with this structure, if we have 3 or 4 criteria, it will really allow the student to quickly select the most appropriate option to judge the quality of the feedback. What can also be done is to provide a small text field for the student to give feedback, to indicate whether they found the feedback useful or not. In any case, to leave a comment on the evaluation they have given. The key point with this type of phase is not to ask too much of the students, because it often comes at a stage where they have already given feedback and evaluated their peers on assignments or their contribution to group work. So in this phase, it's true that we tend to recommend using only a few criteria. It all depends on the format you have. If your activity has really focused on analyzing feedback, then you can include more. But if you're unsure, 2 or 3 criteria for this type of phase is a good number. You can, well, it also depends on the level of detail you expect from the students, but 2 or 3 works well. You can also include just 1 if you simply want to get an overall sense of how the feedback was received. You can use just a single criterion, which could be the last one we see here, the potential usefulness for improvement, which is the primary purpose of feedback, to enable improvement. This is just to understand whether the feedback was useful to the students. This information is very interesting. It's true that earlier we highlighted the benefits for the students. For the teacher, it also allows them to assess the quality of the feedback given by the students and to see whether the students themselves found it relevant. So if you really don't want to ask too much of the students at that point, you can use only the last criterion you see here. So on Challenge Me, as we'll see later, there are already established sets of criteria that you can use directly. So here's a quick checklist for setting up this type of evaluation. First, plan the periods during which you want students to assess each other. If it's about submitting assignments with peer evaluation, clearly define those periods and decide when you want to include the evaluation of feedback. There are no rules regarding whether this should be done asynchronously or synchronously at this stage. Some instructors will implement it directly during class so that students have dedicated time to assess, while others will have it done asynchronously after the evaluation. So there really aren't any strict rules, but the main idea is to clearly define the periods during which you want them to evaluate. Clearly define the criteria, as we saw earlier, using observable elements to really guide students in providing feedback. You can either go with a format that includes, say, a maximum of 3 criteria, because as I mentioned, this is a stage where students are being asked for input after already having gone through an evaluation phase. If you have an activity that is really focused on learning how to give feedback, you can include more criteria. And if you just want a quick phase for students to complete, which still allows you to measure the quality of the feedback given, you can also simply ask the student to check off just 1 criterion out of 4 levels to indicate whether they found the feedback relevant or not. This way, the student can complete it very quickly, and it gives you an idea while also prompting the student to read the feedback they received and analyze it properly. Next, you need to present the activity format to the students to explain the different steps they will have to complete, as well as the purpose of the elements you are asking them for and the phases they will need to go through. You can also introduce to the students beforehand what constitutes relevant and useful feedback. For that, we have resources that we can share with you, which you can present to the students that explain how to give feedback, what the purpose of feedback is, and how it should be structured. We have examples of written feedback on drafts of assignments, as well as on intra-group versions. So depending on the format of the activity, you can present the resources that are directly related. Then supervise the evaluation to make sure that everything is going smoothly. And afterwards, take some time to present the results to the students regarding the quality of the feedback they provided, the overall trend in the class, maybe highlight some feedback that was particularly well rated and understand why. Also ask the students what they think about the evaluations and the feedback they gave each other, and use in any case, use the results to help the whole class improve and to get feedback on the activity format as well. Also to see if the students really understood and were able to make use of all the teaching methods we want to promote through this type of activity. A quick slide to show how Challenge Me can make this type of evaluation easier. So this type of evaluation, it's true that you can do it quite well manually, but there will still be quite a few limitations and it will require a lot of manual actions. So here, it's true that with Challenge Me, it really makes sense because, there's a feedback evaluation phase that allows you to automate the assignment in particular and the delivery of results. It's true that if you want to set it up manually, that's what's going to be very, let's say, time consuming. And here, the advantage with Challenge Me is really to make this implementation easier. So we have templates with predefined criteria. We'll have automatic email reminders, Excel reports to easily analyze the results, and also analysis within the platform, as we'll see. You can also calculate a custom score. For example, 80% could be based on the evaluation of assignments and 20% on the quality of the feedback given. That's actually a format that we'll often see. We have an AI assistant that can be activated to help students learn how to give feedback as well. The assistant will be able to help the student provide relevant feedback. So it's true that for this format, it can be particularly useful. And then you have resources, as well as a support team, which includes myself and Florent, who are here to help you with any technical or pedagogical questions you might have. So now I'll show you how to create a challenge in this type of activity format. All right, so I'm going to switch over to the platform to show you all of this. There you go. So now you should be seeing my screen where you can see the Challenge Me interface. Just as a reminder, when you're coming from an LMS like Moodle or Blackboard, you simply add a Challenge Me activity to your course, then click on it, and you'll arrive at this interface. When you're live, you click on New Challenge. So when live, it's accessed with a login and password. You click on New Challenge, and then you'll see the different templates that we offer you. So the interfaces you're about to see are the ones that will be available very soon, in just a few days. If you go to Challenge Me right now, what you'll see will be a little bit different. So there you go, just to let you know that these interfaces you're about to see will be available in a few days. So we'll find a system of templates where you can select a template that already includes a submission phase, an evaluation phase, and a phase we'll call back feedback, which is the evaluation of feedback. So it's this phase that will interest us, and then a results phase. So we can see other templates such as submission and evaluation of work. So this one doesn't concern us directly since there is no feedback evaluation phase, which is the topic of this webinar. We also have the evaluation of group members if we want to do intra-group assessment, to identify group dynamics. We can also select this template, but again, there is no feedback evaluation here. And then the evaluation of classroom presentations. Again, that's not the subject of this webinar, but just know that with all these templates, you can easily add a feedback evaluation phase manually if you want to develop and include this type of approach in your activities as well. Here, I'm going to start from a template that already exists, which already includes a feedback evaluation phase. So I click on Create. And now I'm going to have a format where, I already have 4 phases. A phase for submitting work, a phase for evaluating the work, a phase for evaluating the feedback received. This is the phase that comes after the evaluation of the work, and then a results phase. So the key point here is just to make sure that the feedback evaluation phase starts after the work evaluation phase to ensure that everyone begins at the same time. Afterwards, you can even have them overlap a little bit, but that requires students to wait until they receive feedback before evaluating. So that's the format we're going to recommend. So here we're asking you to set the start and end dates for each phase. To do that, you click on the date and then change it to the dates you want. You can enable certain notifications if needed. Next, you'll be able to add the participants. So if you're integrated with an LMS, you can enroll them directly from your LMS. If it's an individual assignment, you can click on enroll individually. And here, you'll select the students to enroll in the challenge. Or if it's group work, you click on enroll as a team. And here, you'll be able to select groups that already exist in your LMS and add them to your challenge. If you're not using an LMS, meaning you don't necessarily have the feature or the API enabled, you can also import participants via Excel. Here you click on import participants and you can add participants in Excel format. So the file will ask for as well an Excel or CSV file with 2 columns, one column for email. If it's individual, just one email column. And if it's for groups, one email column and one column with the group name. You have a sample file here. You can download it and re-import it. This is for the participants. Next, we will have the evaluation criteria. So here we will ask for the evaluation criteria for the work assessment phase, meaning which criteria you want the students to use when evaluating each other's work. So the first step, here you can define a certain number of criteria here. So we have criteria in the form of stars. So here, for example, I'll put criterion 1, so a criterion in the form of stars. We can also have criteria in the form of predefined options. That's what we generally recommend, since in order to have a truly objective evaluation, you want observable elements for each criterion. You can, for example, enter the name of the criterion here, then level 1 here, level 2, and the different performance levels will appear here like this. Level 4, and then for each level, you can assign a number of points to generate a final score. So here I've created a criterion with 4 levels. The student will be able to select the desired level for their criterion. So as I was saying, this is the format we generally recommend. You can set this up for grading assignments, but also for evaluating feedback. So it's this feedback here that will be given and evaluated by the students. And here, in fact, in this template, we already have some existing feedback. So is the feedback precise? Is it constructive? Is it clear? You can keep these criteria or edit them if needed. Just click on edit and you can modify the elements you want. You can also create new criteria, as I showed you, or select from the existing challenge criteria. You click on predefined criteria, then you select the criteria. Now, these aren't very meaningful criteria because I'm on the development platform to show you the upcoming interfaces. But when you use it, you'll have an existing set of criteria, including feedback evaluation criteria. So there you go. Once you've completed your criteria, that's it. You can launch your challenge. You click on publish, and then students will be able to log into the platform and participate according to the phases you've defined in planning. So as you can see, it can go very quickly to complete, at least from a technical standpoint, an activity of this kind. What will take time is mainly the evaluation criteria. But keep in mind that for the evaluation of received feedback, you already have some predefined criteria. It's going to be for the evaluation of assignments. Afterwards, you'll be able to define your own criteria. But if you have your criteria grid, just fill it in here, and then the students will be able to use it. So here we have a system that allows you to launch this type of evaluation quite quickly. So the format I just showed you, as you understood, is for evaluating the feedback received. So I'm a student, I give feedback to my classmates, and I evaluate the quality of the feedback I received. Knowing that with this format, we've been asked for a certain amount of information. You can also go into the advanced settings afterwards if you want to add specific parameters like a title for the challenge, a summary, or if you want to add instructions. Here, it's true that there are instructions that are already preset, but you can modify them if needed. By default, we don't display them at the launch, but you can absolutely change them if you wish. So the idea is really to be able to launch it very quickly, but if you need to go a bit further with the settings, well, you can do that here. So that's that was about the settings side. And then you can also see a preview of what it will look like from the student's perspective. the student will see the different phases of their challenge: submitting work, evaluating feedback, and results. So here, I'm in the work submission period, so I can submit my work here, but we can also take a look at what it looks like during the feedback evaluation phase. Hop, that's it. If I click on feedback evaluation, I'll be able to see the different feedbacks I've received as a student. So here, the feedback will be displayed here. Here, I'll have a second feedback to evaluate, a third one, and I'll be able to indicate whether I found the feedback precise, whether I found it constructive, whether I found it clear, so the different criteria we defined earlier. And with a reminder of the work that was evaluated, if it's ours, it will be our work. If it's a classmate's, it will be someone else's work. So there you go. You can always go to the preview to see if the challenge is set up the way you want. Just a quick note to show you how you can really personalize your challenge. So here, it's true that I use this template, but I could just as easily decide to do a group member evaluation. Here I click on this format. So now I have a group member evaluation phase and a results phase. I can go into the launch configuration to indicate that I want to add an additional feedback evaluation phase. So here I go to add a phase and select feedback evaluation. I click on it, and then I can fill in the various pieces of information required to create my phase. And there you go, my phase has been added. So in this phase, students will evaluate the feedback received from their peers, but within the context of evaluating the members of their group. Keep in mind that this also works for oral presentation evaluation. It's exactly the same principle. You just need to remember to add an extra phase here. If you want to evaluate the feedback that you have given, that is the first format I showed you, which is the self-evaluation of your own feedback. Same principle, we just add a phase, but this time it's self-evaluation. I click on self-evaluation, and just like before, I'm asked for various pieces of information that I fill in. And there you go, I have my self-evaluation phase, which I will then place after the group member evaluation phase. But there you have it. It's really this phase system that you need to understand well in order to create the scenario that interests you. And finally, there's another phase, which is evaluating the quality of feedback from other classmates. Here, once again, you select the phase that best fits the format you want to use. So if I add this phase, it will allow me to ask students to evaluate the feedback given by, other classmates. So here, you see, we really have the three formats: self-evaluation of the feedback given, evaluation of classmates, feedback given by classmates, and evaluation of the feedback received. And that we can do either using a template if the template fits the scenario we're addressing, or we can start from an existing template and then adapt it according to our expectations. And then you have there you go, the activity tracking, which allows you to monitor for each phase whether the student has properly completed what was asked, a summary of all the results received by each student, so the scores on the work produced, but also on the quality of the feedback given, etc. So you will have all of this, which you can find here. Now, I don't have any students enrolled here, so we don't see anyone, but this is where you will be able to find all the necessary information. What I especially wanted to show you was how to set up this type of activity, to show you that it can be quite flexible and that you can really address many use cases at this level and thus make it easier to implement this phase, which is extremely interesting for students when you want to work on the feedback aspect. I've reached the end of this webinar. So, well, now if you have any questions or if you would like me to go over certain points again, I invite you to turn on your microphones and ask your questions.